I just couldn't believe it that anyone could even do something like that, even a sickos.
He's evil. He's evil incarnate.
He's the most prolific serial killer, rapist in the history of California, for sure. And it didn't have to happen. I mean, he should have been caught.
Joseph James DeAngelo is facing life in prison and potentially the death sentence, facing a total of 26 charges, 13 of them for murder. He's believed to have raped about 50 women and burglarized hundreds of homes in crimes spanning 6 California counties. For those crimes, he's suspected to be the man known as the Golden State Killer, the original Nightstalker in Southern California, and the East Area Rapist in Sacramento. But we're going back to the place where his alleged decade-long crime spree began, where he still is known as the Visalia Ransacker.
He drove us crazy for 2.5 years.
He was known as a bizarre burglar, leaving behind odd trails and acting in ways that puzzled authorities.
He'd take one earring from a pair. He'd take cheap rings. On photos, happy photos, he'd do what we call the 3 T's. He'd take it, tear it, or throw it.
By the end of 1975, the ransacker had burglarized over 100 homes. But Marjorie Smith, who has become an expert on the Golden State Killer's crimes, says she doesn't remember anything on TV about the ransacker and barely anything on the newspapers.
I knew that there was a man out breaking into homes. So that's when I became afraid, only because I knew what was going on. Visalians did not know what was going on.
That was until September 11th of 1975, when 16-year-old Beth Snelling woke up in the middle of the night to an attacker trying to drag her out. The same one authorities suspected had been peeping and prowling around her home.
A man waking me up wearing a ski mask and telling me that I was coming with him and that if I screamed, he would kill me. So we went out the back door.
Beth's father, Claude Snelling, woke up and saw the man already outside the house trying to take her.
Couldn't believe what he was seeing, and then he just charged out the back door, and the man pushed me down and shot my dad twice and then took off running.
Snelling was a journalism professor at a nearby college. He's one of 13 murders Joseph James DeAngelo was charged with in 2018. The murder, experts at the time speculated, changed not only Visalia, but the suspect himself.
We actually had Joel Forte, who was the psychiatrist on the Patty Hearst case, come in and help us. And he said, you better catch him, because now that he's touched Snelling's daughter, he's going to graduate and he's going to kidnap and kill somebody.
More officers were deployed and more departments became involved, but the calls kept coming in and the ransacker continued to escape police.
We actually saw him several times, and he would come down the street up against the houses in the bushes. We had dogs, we even had dogs trying to trail him, and he always seemed to disappear.
Farrel Ward was an officer for Exeter Police, the town next to Visalia, when he was called in to work on the ransacker case because he had a canine and dogs were scarce in those departments at the time.
They called us basically for backup because they thought the guy was still in the same neighborhood.
But what he didn't know was that he and the dog were chasing one of his own, a colleague he knew well, working side by side with him for 3 years.
He's been in my house, he's met my family.
What was he like?
To me, he wasn't an outgoing guy, but he was always serious. He didn't like to joke around like the other guys. Policemen like to joke around because it relieves tension, you know. And he was always to himself.
He was part of a burglary task force at some point?
Yes.
So he could have totally been investigating his own ransackings.
Yeah, he was selected as being head of their anti-burglary federally funded team. So he had a lot of practice.
Patrol would take the reports from the crimes that happened the night before, and then since he was the investigator, he would go out and investigate the crimes. And then he would make the determination whether to close the case or leave it open or whatever. It was his decision to make. Well, if he did the crimes, he would follow up on the cases and take care of it. Case closed.
When Joe DeAngelo moved to the area in '73, a newspaper article touted the community's newest officer's impressive training, which included an internship at Roseville PD, a Sierra College law enforcement program, a degree from Sac State, and postgraduate studies in criminal justice. To Ward, he was clearly overqualified.
And I asked him, "What are you doing here, Joe? You should be at the FBI." And he said, "Well, this is just a stepping stone for me." He said, "I'm just getting my experience behind me, and then I'm going to move to bigger departments." And I thought it was kind of strange that he would come to such a small town with his education.
Knowing now that he was a police officer, I really feel that he was loving and enjoying what was happening. Part of his satisfaction in doing what he was doing was beating us. And he was laughing at us probably.
In December of 1975, the ransacker had his last encounter with police in Visalia. The mother of another teenager found some footprints outside of her daughter's bedroom window. Visalia PD officers suspected the man would show up that night and prepared for an encounter.
So this is where the stakeout happened. So they were in the garage, they could see him from inside, from that window. Okay.
He jumped the fence over here, and that's where, and it wasn't like that. It wasn't 6 feet tall. You know,
Where
it was much
the
lower.
encounter with McGowan?
Right there.
Right there. That's where McGowan got shot.
Officers William McGowan and Dwayne Shipley were hiding, ready to confront him. Vaughan says he remembers that night well.
So we decided, after all the stakeouts that we did, hours we put in, that we would stay there.
You knew he was coming.
Yeah, and wait for him to come to us. And that's what happened. McGowan sees him walk down the side of the garage into the backyard of the girl's house, and he confronts him. And the guy turns around and starts screaming in almost a high girl's screaming voice, "Don't hurt me, don't hurt me." So McGowan confronts him and approaches him, tells him to freeze, police officer, and the guy reaches up with his right hand, starts pulling the ski mask off his head, and McGowan now sees the ransacker face for the first time. Really the only one who really can confirm that saw the ransacker. And he comes up with his left hand and fires.
The night replayed in Vaughan's memory for decades.
Today I can say that I feel awful that we didn't get him. We wouldn't be having this interview right now if we'd gotten him. There would be no East Area Rapist. There would be no Golden State Killer if we'd got him. That was our shot.
He said that was the moment, the big what if, that could have changed everything.
Well, I think we should have caught him when we had him. I mean, we had officers all over the place. We had 40 officers there in 20 minutes. Highway Patrol, Sheriff's Office, they all came. We had a command center set up. We had dogs.
Officer McGowan suffered an injury to his eye, but was able to describe the man he saw. Finally, Visalia PD had a sketch for a suspect, but that was the last they heard of the ransacker. The following August of 1978, the Exeter Sun published that DeAngelo would be resigning the local force to take a job with Auburn Police. By June of '76, a new crime spree, more violent than that in Visalia, was playing out in the Sacramento region. Authorities suspect the ransacker then became the East Area Rapist. Linda Odell was 22 in May of 1977. At 2 a.m., she and her husband woke up to an intruder in their bedroom.
Both of us are tied with our hands behind our back, and our ankles are also tied. So he left the bedroom, he went into the kitchen and got dishes. So he brought the dishes, he put them on my husband's back, he untied my ankles, told me to follow him. I'm in a little teeny nightie, And I walked down the hallway, and as I'm walking down the hallway, I'm saying, oh my God, I'm gonna be raped. He went to the kitchen, he started drinking beer. Then he came back, he had a knife in his hand. He decided to rape me and had the knife to my throat and saying if I made any sound or screamed or moved, I would be killed.
Odell was about the East Area Rapist's 20th attack in the Sacramento area. When John Vaughan in Visalia started reading about these types of attacks in Sacramento, he knew where his suspect had gone. He
did a lot of things when he was raping that were, I thought, pointed toward the ransack burglaries. Photos were torn, thrown. I mean, he was doing the same thing, just like ours. It looked like our burglaries were now happening in Sacramento.
Vaughan said in 1978 he went to Sacramento to tell the sheriff's office that he believed the so-called East Area Rapist was the same suspect as his Visalia Ransacker, bringing with him the sketch.
Who did you tell?
Sheriff's office.
And what did they say or do?
They wouldn't believe me. But it appeared to me that the rape detectives weren't talking to the burglary detectives. They weren't sharing information because he was there. He was there.
In a Sacramento Bee article from the summer of 1978, a spokesperson from the Sacramento Sheriff's Office called Visalia PD irresponsible for trying to make the connection and accused officers Vaughan and McGowan of trying to get publicity, claiming that the man who by that point had raped 39 women in Sacramento had a different shoe size from the ransacker, and the MO just didn't match.
The statement I got from them was that the sheriff did not want the people to think there was a killer in Sacramento, that he wasn't killing anybody yet. I don't know why they didn't accept that, and I don't know if it would have made a difference. I'm not saying that they did anything bad that caused further people to get raped, but I wish they had believed us, because our guy disappeared. We were convinced that our guy couldn't stop. I mean, he couldn't stop. He went somewhere else.
And according to Sacramento District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert, along with another 5 DAs from across California, he didn't stop.
Do you suspect that there were other crimes that are not even being connected to him?
Yes. You know, they had a period there where he didn't do anything. I don't believe that.
In the coming weeks, we'll be exploring that very question. Were there others, other crimes, other victims we don't know about, other ways to have stopped him? And in one particular story we've been following, was there another man convicted of a gruesome crime he may not have committed, serving decades in prison for a murder that had just too many of the traits and calling cards of the Visalia Ransacker, and around the same time in the same area that he was terrorizing in that Central Valley community?